Hello. That's a good start. So today I want to talk a little bit about how can we design more consciously with light. I guess we're trying to find a bit more empathetic way of designing with light that is more engaging for people and nature around us. And it's really, what I really want to give you today is a little insight in how we try as a studio to engage with these difficult topics of the world that we're facing, whether that's an AI, whether it's the circular economy, whether it's nature, whether it's more inclusivity. There's a lot to consider and a lot to be conscious about, I guess. It's not a kind of very linear presentation, so I wanted to give you some sort of insights in some of our projects and how we try to address this kind of more empathetic design that we're trying to achieve with our lighting. So I'm Benz. We're at Speirs, a major light architecture studio. We're very lucky to have done projects all over the world. So I'll give you a snippet. We do a lot of heritage projects, a lot of new towers, and mainly we're really focusing, I guess, on how you as a person experience light around us. So we're really focusing on tiny details, as you can see on the lower left. Tiny details make the lighting for an enormous tower. But I am always been very inspired by this book, Painting with Light. And I want to show you a film noir image first, because John Alton was a cinematographer from the early 20th century, and he wrote this fantastic book about painting with light. And what's so good about it is that he had this thing about it's not what you light, it's what you don't light, how the shadows create. And it always inspires me because he used very simple techniques to create great atmospheres. And therefore creating a great environment to be in. And if I show you another film noir image, this is what we often do. I stole this image from one of our directors. Is walking this tightrope, and this is what this presentation today is about. Is the level of decisions you have to make as a designer. Do we use more AI? Do we use less AI? How does it impact the world? If I'm not lighting the space, it will be better for ecology, but maybe less good for safety. It will be less inclusive. So it's this balancing act that we do every day in our work. So things that we should consider, first of all, is the context, which is absolutely crucial for lighting design. And we notice more and more that the contextual approach to lighting is actually crucial to the success of the lighting scheme. And the context can vary, whether it's an economical context, or it's a retail, or whether it's darkness, it's better for ecology, or even a social context. I mean, the where people live is actually really, really, really important. And you can see that here in London as well. Ironically, richer neighborhoods tend to be darker than poorer neighborhoods. And is that right or not? There's also a series of objectives that we need to consider and balancing all the time, whether it's safety, energy consumption, how you operate it, how can you maintain the light fittings, but also how does it work with accessibility, and can everybody access the space, or are we going to glare a series of people? And then there's the atmosphere that we want to consider, the subjective one. I guess here's the main creative challenge for lighting designers. So what is the character of this space? What is the ambience? Can it bring joy? Or is it simply beautiful? But also light can be used to make identities for buildings. But most importantly, we found over the years is that it's the people that make it. And it's not only that we light for people, it's also engaging a lot of people. And what we found on a lot of projects, the most successful project is where we can engage the facility managers that has to operate the lighting once we're gone, as well as architects, as well as users. And it's not very often that you actually can talk to end users. But if we connect everybody and try everybody to talk about light, you create a much better project. Because in the end of the day, we're all humans. And humans has this very interesting thing is that we are the only species in the world that obviously need artificial light. There's no other animal, species, tree, or anything that needs light. It's only us. And also humans are the species that most rely on their vision to make sense of the world around us. Where other animals use touch or feel or smell, we rely on our eyes to make sense of our umwelt. And umwelt is probably one of the most favorite words ever. And it's also the word that I love because that is how you sense the world. Umwelt is the German word for environment, but it does mean more than environment. It's how you sense the environment around you. And that's what we do with our eyes. And because we use our eyes so much, that's in a way how we make sense of our world, how we navigate our world around us. And lighting design is essentially shaping this perception of this umwelt, and we can make a shared perception of the umwelt. And what's so interesting, and some biologist said once, he thought that because humans are so successful because they can share their vision, and there's not many species that actually can do it in the same way. We can all see the same thing and we can discuss it together. We create a shared environment. And with that, we're using darkness and light to shape that environment and how we perceive a space. It's different when you look at this, the dark abyss or the light abyss. But this also changes over time. As you can see here, time and light are very, very much intertwined and related. We all know, just by stepping outside the door, if we're looking at the daylight, you know what time it is. This changing moment is very intertwined with us. And there's a question whether you need to do the same with artificial light and have the kind of changing ability, the kind of inherent sense of time. Because we all share the same kind of planet. This is the Cassini spacecraft taking a photo from the tiny Earth in space. This shared world is important for us. That's why we need to think about everybody and how our design impacts it. Because other species experience light in a very, very different way. For example, if you are a jumping spider, you're being born with the lifetime supplies of your sensitive cells. And they get more sensitive over time. So for a spider, it's like watching the sun rising over his entire lifetime, which could be quite beautiful, but his way of achieving light is very, very different than we do. And so our own world, we think it's all there is, but it is not all there is. That's a mistake that every species make. And what's so interesting, you should read this book by Ed Young called An Immense World, is that every animal perceives the world very different, perceives the light very, very different. So for us, it's very hard to think about it. I mean, Thomas Nagel, the philosopher, wrote in the 70s an article about what is it like to be a bat. And you cannot really do that because you simply miss the perception. You know, they use different sensors than we do. So they can sense the world completely different. So you can only guess what an animal, how they might see the world. But it's almost the same for humans. You know, this is the Ishikawa plates, and they obviously tested for color blindness. And we know that every person sees the world slightly different. And for us, it's very important if we want to have more conscious design, more empathetic design for other people, is trying to imagine how another person might see the world around you. We did this little experiment last year with Helen at the dark event at Light 25, where we created a little installation with the Ashara plates on the side and a big square in the middle that presented the animal eyes. And we realized the only way you can even start thinking about what might be is the color that animals might see. So we walk into this space and you could see the color that an animal only can see. In this case, an octopus, it's mainly black and white with shades of blue. And at the same time, you have the color blindness plates on the side to kind of start a discussion about how you might see the world differently. This is the final installation, and you can see where you come in this kind of blue immersion of color. And the idea was that you can almost get a sense of grip of how an animal might see the world in the different wavelengths of light. And here's the bat. And what's quite interesting is that, again, people see different numbers on the plate, so it started this discussion, and it's not meant to be like an all-inclusive. As I said, you cannot imagine what another species sees, but you can at least start to imagine, be more inspired to design in a different way. So if you think about, take this quote from Arthur Schopenhauer, every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. But that's not true. And I think this is important to realize, because as a designer, if we want to be more empathetic, we need to start imagining how it is for other people to experience your design, which I think we don't do quite enough. We're trying, but we have to try harder to make better designs. Because at the moment, everything is kind of human-centric, which is obviously right, because we want to make better spaces, improve human well-being. And I think if you look at the ISO 9241, this is the description of a human-centric design. But human-centric design alone is not enough. We need to think about the other inhabitants of our planet, whether that's plants or species, and our other fellow human beings. So these constant questions, remember about the tightrope, is our people more important or is ecology more important, is crucial. And we're trying to test some of these concepts out, actually. This is a project we've done in Canada Water, in a boardwalk designed by Asif Khan, and it goes through a new nature reserve. This is also the bat corridor in Canada Water here in East London. So London Wildlife Trust helped us set out, they gave us a series of directions for bats to kind of fly better, be less interrupted by light. And obviously bats get really disturbed, like most animals, by the blue end of the LED spectrum. The warmer the light, the better for them. So if it was candles, even warmer. It's more like, if some of you still remember sodium light, that's much better for bats. So what we did is kind of follow the bat pattern with our lighting scheme. So they know that, from surveys, they know that the bats are actually hibernating in winter. So in a way, you have to be less conscious for the bats when they're sleeping anyway. But in the middle, in the summer, they're active, and we know roughly what time it is. So once they got active, once they start flying, we will have our integrated lighting in the handrail dim down. And not only dimming down, it also changed the color temperature from a kind of white light to a kind of very amber light to have a minimal disruption for the bats at night. So we have the little bat lighting scene. So the control follows their kind of behavior and their flying pattern. And this is then the end result. So you can see the lighting detail A presents most lighting to the bridge itself, less into the wetlands next to it, and it stays on the bridge. And then over time, it changes in color temperature. But what's also fascinating is that once you get because the bridge is so red, you can only experience the change in color really by measuring it. So we took this kind of 3000 Kelvin, which is a standard white light, relatively warm white light, take it off down. It goes off the kind of white light spectrum. It's very, very warm, much better for the bats. But I just realized that for us making a bridge warmer, we don't really see the difference. But for a bat, it makes a huge difference. So light or darkness is very important, and it's not taken lightly, because most people say we make everything dark, which is good, obviously, for ecology, but it's not always great for how people, for the sense of safety, especially in inner parks like London. The photo on the left is our project in Elephant Park in South London, and it's actually surveys after the lighting scheme said that women feel safer at night. It's not necessarily that the park is super bright, but we create pockets of light. So the feeling of safety is important and should be ignored against ecology. But again, what is the best choice is very hard to make. So that's where master planning helps in. And we've done a few master plans. One of this example is our master plan for the City of London. We did it a few years ago, where we actually planned darker areas. And it's interesting that when we had consulted with the London police, they said brighter spaces are not always safer spaces either. If a space feels too bright, people feel that spaces must be unsafe, so they won't go there. So they were like, don't light every street very bright. We've also been very interesting. We've been involved with the City of London to help them make a supplementary planning document. And what's so interesting about this, that's the other side, that's design. That has to do with planning, regulations. But this is really, really interesting to help them, because that really solves the problem of light pollution and makes cities truly darker. Maybe even better than designing spaces yourself. But what we realized through that is that context is absolutely important. So if I take you to another project we've done all the way on the other side of the world in Hong Kong, this is a big project we've done in Tai Kau, that's East Hong Kong, over there. And what was really interesting, we've done lobbies, interiors for towers, a bridge that connected them, and a public realm around it, surrounding that. This is one of the few projects which I personally love, because we went down there without knowing what the place was. We didn't have a concept, which we went over a few nights earlier, make the concept on the spot, because what we realized is we want to kind of investigate what the context is of the space. What are they, and then set the objectives out to see what it is like, because we realized it can only be successful if it really, really relates to that specific place and specific context. And what's so interesting in Hong Kong, when you start measuring luminosity, is a great place. And it's very strange, because obviously in Hong Kong the pollution is relatively high from light, but that means that clouds are much brighter than you're actually walking around. And it has to do with the reflection value. Because there's lots of light concrete buildings, reflects lots of light, it creates a lot of brightness around you. But the trees, for example, reflect less light and therefore appear much, much darker. So landscapes, they create this kind of glow from around. We also found out that there was a really different occupancy of the space. which actually even the client was surprised by. Not sure if it's positive or negative, but what's so interesting, when we went there, we thought Sunday evening is deserted, but it wasn't. Loads and loads and loads of people using their spaces at night. We also looked at spaces, viewing angles from above, from below, which is important to get a 360 degree of the contextual experience. And what we also realized, what's so interesting is the contribution of the kind of visual cloud of office lighting, being a tower being switched on or switched off. Are trees being lit or not lit? It makes a huge difference because that brings the scale of light right down to where people are. So we presented the client with all these contexts, these findings that makes up the context and to start to work from there. Again, these are luminosity values, which I always found interesting because the extreme between, let's say, the grass is, in this photo, is not really showing it justice, but it's actually dark compared to bright sky above you, which is strange. Or like loads of the trees, as I said earlier, are dark compared to this kind of luminous sky. So we decided to have a series of summaries that we can then use to design our concept around. Like the unlit canopies feel quite gloomy if you don't like trees in Hong Kong, to be fair. Activity varies, and the ambient light is so diffuse everywhere. So we came up with this concept to connect different pieces. As I said earlier, we're kind of lucky to be involved in walkways that connect towers, that sees landscape, the landscape itself, and these kind of lobby spaces that you can see. So we really focus on positive vistas. This is one of the final photos of the final project, where you can see into lobby spaces are connected to outdoor spaces, as well as the distance views that you get through the kind of design by landscape design by Gustas and Porter. But what's really interesting, what we found was really missing in Hong Kong, is that you can never experience moonlight, and we thought it was a bit strange. You can see the moon, but you can't see actually moonlight that we quite often can see, even in London still. So there's a light that we want to kind of bring back to the place. And if you look at the images, you can see the blue silvery shimmer that we've studied quite hard for. So these are the park again, the towers, and then the moonlight stuff that was missing. And that has to do with our vision. And you probably noticed from the start that I'm personally quite interested in our vision and our umwelt, is that by day we use our photopic vision, at night you use the scotopic vision. What's interesting, in our modern urban world, we hardly ever use scotopic vision because it simply doesn't get dark enough. It's also interesting that at night, the moonlight, if you measure it, is actually warmer than daylight. So it should feel warmer, but because it's so low, your eyes only perceive the kind of bluer end of the spectrum. So this is the wavelengths you can see with your cones and your rod cells, with your scotopic vision and your night vision. And you can see that the wavelengths move to the kind of blue or silver light. And that's something we have to try to recreate, which is a bit fake, you can argue, but it's kind of interesting. So we did a lot of tests of how to create this kind of moonlight, how to create a sense of a natural feel of the space, which we believed, skip a slide, should be around very, very, very cold white. So it's a kind of it's a white, between a white light and a blue light, and it's quite silver. And what's interesting, when we did the test, one of the client team said, oh, this really reminds me when I go out walking on the peaks. It reminds me of moonlight. So yeah, it had the same feel. And what I think is so interesting and relevant to the context of Hong Kong is that you walk now into the park and it feels different. It feels like moonlight, and it feels very, very, very different than its surrounding, but it has a seamless blend. It's like not you step into a theater zone, you kind of walk into this kind of more natural feel of a park, which has a quality of light that you can't see it immediately around. You know, we present a lot of shadows and spaces that you won't see in the adjacent areas. Also, the perception of flowers is very different. There's a perception of day and the perception of night with different colors. And because we take out the color rendering, the silver moonlight gives like a purple flower a very different appearance during the sunlight in the day and during the at night. And this is a great garden because what Urbis, the executive landscape designer, has done so interestingly, they planted hundreds of indigenous species from Hong Kong into this park. And that makes the park very educational. And here you can see how it kind of works in action. You can see the pink flowers on the image on the left are really depleted in color. But as soon as you put the white light on it, the pink comes out. And when you walk in, you see this kind of natural different shapes and forms and colors of of the vegetation. Next topic I want to blend into, it's another special thing I think what we've done here. We actually, while we're designing this, we actually built a physical model, which seems very, very, very old school these days, to build a mock-up and trees, and then stand all around us with loads and loads of torches trying to kind of light this model. But what's so interesting is that once you light the model, you can create the physical quality of light that you might experience in real life. You can see the shadows are actually real shadows because it's made with real light. So we build up the scene like this. We had our moonlight overlay, and then the kind of warm-up light, and create this composition of light. Here's another shot of the model, and then how it works with white light. And I think this way of working is really interesting because it's a kind of very, very active and very social. And again, if you think about people and connecting people, this is much more helpful because we're actually all talking about it while we're holding our torches and create a kind of interactive design session. Very different than the gamification almost of light, which we do now. If we fast forward, obviously the new D5 models are very, very, very active. Real-time rendering is on the doorstep, and it has a great quality to it, although digital, but it has certainly a different engagement. And if we're going to step it up to AI, it's even more. And this is where the real challenge comes in. I think we all have experience with AI. Running nighttime images very easy, and easy in trying to create kind of lighting schemes to that, which is a very different way of working. And I think I wanted to add this to our kind of design conscious thinking, because obviously AI has environmental impact, but also how do we anticipate working as a designer in this emerging field? It's really interesting because you could have a very technical solution. This is a solution we tested earlier, where if just turn your photo from your phone and check what the AI is doing and create a kind of different light distribution. It is very a quick thing to study. But it also gives creative opportunities, which are quite interesting and wild. And I think a lot of studios we're practicing now have this kind of amazing assistance that feeds back a lot of creativity and come up with solutions that you might never think. I felt this is interesting AI image on the right that shows the indication of time with seasonal fruits, and I thought, oh, that's good. So we then spun on to kind of create more concepts. But AI goes further. A few years ago, we did this future project called the Third Age of Light, and we're trying to imagine what the future might be like. And the big theme on that thing was to have people have these colorful glasses on and try and experience the world that way. The idea was that you never need lighting because the augmented reality in your glasses actually will render the world for you. So imagine the city could be completely dark. You have your AI, AR glasses on, and you can navigate the world that way. And see here, Meta just released AI glasses, and with an AR overlay that kind of renders the world for you, gives you real-time information. I would recommend everybody to test these glasses. I tested it. It's quite scary. I'm not sure if I quite like it, but you definitely can see that you might walk through a dark city soon. That you can basically use the AR to augment your world around you. But what it doesn't do, and I think that's the kind of debate about as we move in further and further into this design with AI world, is that it doesn't combine people. You know, as soon as you put an AI screen on it, you stop talking to each other, which is actually not so good. And talking to people is really, really, really important. And I said earlier, when I showed you the diagram of loads of people talking to each other, that's where we create more conscious design, I think. It's like listening well to everybody's needs. What's really interesting, a few years ago, more than a decade ago, we lit this kind of medieval tower in Utrecht, and we got so fortunate to relight the tower after the refurbishment. And what the city did, they formed a committee of the whole section of the citizens of Utrecht. So there were like students, developers, architects, ecologists, neighbors of the tower. There was one person that lived there, and they were all gonna judge our lighting scheme, which was a very interesting experience, because I think as designers we move into a different world. I think if you 5 years ago you had quite a big ego as a designer to make something good, but actually now suddenly I remember coming into that room, and then suddenly you have to listen to a student, and we're like, no, you're a student. I'm not going to listen to you. But actually, we end up doing it. And it was really interesting when you listen to their comments, and then we try to kind of address these. And what it did, it took a scheme that's on the left that we felt was more our scheme to a scheme that belonged to the city. And if you now ask a person in the town, in the city, they're very, very proud on their tower, obviously, and on the lighting. And what's interesting for us is that tower, actually, the scheme may be less what we would have done, but the city really loves it. And in a way, that's maybe a better outcome. For example, this, right? They liked the color is not really what we would never do with an historic building, but it is a new monument with new life that create life that gives new purpose in there. That photo there was basically somebody walking a 100-meter tower up with color filters on every luminaire, changing the flag. And now, obviously, with new technology, we can do that straight away. But back in the days, there was never any questions asked why you would light this, right? This is an old tower. This is an old picture of the tower from many decades ago, where they just floodlit the tower, loads of pollution everywhere. And now, people really asking, why would you light it? Which is a big question for all monuments, for everything you light outside. And one big thing is that it's interesting that you can review other aspects of a building by day and by night. So if I think consciously about it, what is the benefit of light? Would be that we can show architecture, reveal some of the significant spaces during the night that you would never see during the day. Here's the tower by day, here's the tower by night, and you can see the different perception of day and night, and how you see the inner bits. For example, the top lantern is kind of dark by day, but you can see the details by night. The stained glass window is a dark blob during the day. Even during the night, you never see it. But once we illuminate it, you can experience the beauty of the color of the art. And that may be worth lighting, and that's probably worth the energy spending on it. But now we're working back in Utrecht, and this is other project we're just kind of about to start, is that we try to kind of light and pick details from buildings that you might be able to never see. But during the day, they disappear. Beautiful details in buildings. Little stones, little frescoes, little tiles. During the night, we can light them, and it becomes an educational value. Back to the tower and the circular economy briefly. What's so interesting from having this privilege of relighting an element is that you also can reuse all the equipment again and upgrade it. So the city not really carefully removed all the lighting before the refurbishment, and they dumped it in a big box. So when we opened that, and went through all the bird poo that was a few years old, we found that the luminaires were in relatively good shape. Other luminaires, there's basically technology that is out of date. And then we worked with the original manufacturer to kind of refurbish all of the luminaires that were on the tower. So we investigated with him different optics, how to change the white LED chip, was a kind of white Ciccato chip, to a kind of color changing RGBW LED. And what it does for the light distribution. And we measure it even in our own studio. We also thought that changing ideas is actually good, because in the previous scheme we have loads of uplighting that is in the ground, which is obviously a maintenance headache. And we finally admitted it's not so good for maintenance, so we put it higher up. We're tidying up more some of the installation. And what's so interesting is from the installation, because the previous scheme had a very kind of almost theater-like installation. It was clamped, it was never drilled. So you could reuse it, which makes it a good idea for the circular economy. Is the way you install things is absolutely important. So fixing methodologies, tiles, that we have essentially re-upgrading, re-engineered the detail to a more permanent metal box, as you can see here on the design sketch. And then the final installation here, where you can actually see it's a similar approach, but upgraded with the same luminaires on top and same drivers. And we also reused some concepts, which I thought was quite interesting. So in 1516, somebody designed a big lantern to hang in the medieval time inside this tower, and that became a reason to light the inside of the lantern on top of the tower that we've been in discussion with the historian of the city. So the big question is, would you do precisely the same again? What we're wondering after done the second time around. And the question is probably no. Well, you would do because it's the same building, the same design principles. But because we had this engagement in the city, we talked with everybody around, it became a slightly different design. It became a design that was for everybody. And that question we did again recently in Utrecht when we went back to light other facades, is to say, hold on, we're not going to make you a big scheme. We're going to do a little test and have a chat about it. And what's so interesting about this is that you invite 50 people to look at the mock-up and suddenly everybody has an opinion. But also we give vocabulary to people to start talking together about light and what it means for them. And that is how we believe we can create more conscious design. Because we're all here on this small planet that we share with animals around, plant species, and most of each other. And if we talk more to each other in a better ways, we can create a more conscious design. Thank you for listening.
Does anyone have any questions for Ben? Clearly
Yes.
amazed them into silence.
Oh, perfect.
Well, yeah, I guess with that in mind then, I guess we'll just say thanks again to Benz for a wonderful presentation. And that's our final talk of Clerkenwell Design Week as well. So thanks very much to everyone who's came and seen all of our talks over the course of the last few days. It's been a great week. So thanks very much.